You will find the scripture reading for this morning on the front of your Grow Pray study guide. Today we're reading together selections from Genesis 6, Genesis 7, and Genesis 8, what we know as the flood narrative. So hear now these words as they come to us. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great on the earth, and the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. But Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. I'm going to bring a flood of waters on the earth. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing, of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark to keep them alive with you. Also take with you every kind of food that is eaten and store it up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. And Noah with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth. God blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground. Only Noah was left and those that were with him in the ark. And the waters swelled on the earth for 150 days. In the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and saw that the face of the ground was drying. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Then God said to Noah, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. So Noah went out with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on an altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing odor, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
I suspect that most of you know who Keanu Reeves is. Yes? Keanu Reeves is an American actor who's done many films over his career. And maybe some of you know that 1985 movie that put him on the map. It wasn't his very first acting gig, but it was the film that made him a star and put him on the map. It's a movie called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And I recommend it to you if you haven't seen it, and if you have, I recommend it to you again. It's a movie about 2 high school students, 2 friends, who are about to fail unless they can pass a history project that they've been given. And in an early scene in the movie, their history teacher is asking questions, and he calls on Ted, who is Keanu Reeves' character. And he says to Ted, or he asks Ted, who is Joan of Arc? And Ted says, Noah's wife. After school, his friend Bill says to him, I don't really know who Joan of Arc is, but I know she's not Noah's wife. So Ted says, well then who is Noah's wife? And Bill's response is, I don't know. I have no idea. Who is Noah's wife? It's a good question. Maybe there are even some of us here today that at one time or another in our lives thought that Joan of Arc was Noah's wife. I did some research this week, and as I was looking at some other people's sermons on Noah's wife, many preachers called her Mrs. Noah. It's a name for her that I rather dislike. So I went looking because I wanted to know who she is. I wanted to dig down deep and see if I could find her name. And the answer in the text, of course, is she ain't got one. She doesn't get a name. She is, like so many other women in the scriptures, only listed by her association with a man, in this case, with her husband, Noah. She's Noah's wife. That's all the written text, the written Torah, tells us. But there's a wonderful gift called the oral Torah that has preserved her name. So I went looking for it. And this has been a good week for me because I'm a Bible nerd. I really like to go digging on those kinds of scavenger hunts and digging down into Bible traditions. And since this is first a Jewish story, I went digging for what our Jewish kinfolk have to say about her. And it led me to a word that I have used before with you, even in sermons. What? Plethora. That is one of my favorite words. It doesn't have to be the word that I came up with. The word that I came up with, where this search leads us today, is a word called midrash. Maybe you remember earlier in the summer I used that word in a sermon, and then Jack the next week said that he and his family even looked up the word to see if they could find out what it meant after I used it. So today, Noah's wife presents us together with this opportunity to think about midrash. Here's what you need to know to get into a midrash frame of mind. In the Jewish tradition, reading of Scripture and wanting to know about Scripture is not only about what is written on the page, what it actually says in black and white. The Jewish tradition wants to know what it doesn't say. It wants to know what's been left out, what's been written in between those lines. And this way of reading the text is what we call midrash. It's seeking to fill in the blanks. There's a rabbi named Sandy Sasso, and she says this about her Jewish tradition. The Bible is not intended to be the last word. It is intended to be the first word. And it's an important distinction, I think, because we look, she says, at that first word on the text, and from there we begin to ask all kinds of questions, and we begin to discern what meaning there is for us in the text and in between the text. And maybe to some of us, this sounds a bit scary. Or if not scary, at least a bit off. It's not really what our tradition has said to us outright. And so some of us might be thinking, what do you mean we can just fill in the blanks? That's not what we've ever heard. What do you mean we can ask questions and make assumptions about what's not on the page? We are supposed to take the Bible for what it is, and what is on the page is enough. We don't fill in blanks for ourselves. Or do we? Let's think about it together. The second chapter of Genesis is what we call the Garden of Eden story. Adam and Eve. What's the fruit that they ate in the garden? What fruit did they eat? What do we know it is? Apples. That's what's in all the art. It's what you were told as a kid in Sunday school. It's what we sing about when we think about apples in the children's songs that have it. Apples is what we have been told. But it's not in there, and some of you were saying that already. It doesn't say what kind of fruit that Adam and Eve ate. The text just says they ate of the fruit of the tree. And from there, we begin to speculate. We begin to ask questions, and we begin to theorize. And so the ancient rabbis did that. Way back with the scrolls, they began to theorize, and some said it was wheat. Maybe that's one you hadn't heard of, that it was wheat, or even mushrooms. I don't think of mushrooms when I think of fruit. Some said pomegranates because they look like apples, and they grow in that part of the world where apples really don't. Some rabbis said, no, figs. It was a fig because they covered themselves with fig leaves, so we know a fig was around. So that's what it was. So where in the world do we get apple from all of this? Well, we get it from the Vulgate, which is the Latin translation of the Bible. And when they were translating into Latin and looking at those ancient texts, when they saw the word fruit, they used the word melun, which means evil, but it also happens to mean apple. So you see, we've really been doing this process of filling in the blanks all along. It's a long tradition. People have been doing it as long as there have been texts to read. Here's another example. If you get a Tanakh, I have one right here. Tanakh, that's the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish Bible. If you have any Jewish friends, they will have a Tanakh around, and you can look at theirs, you can look at mine. I'll leave it out in the narthex. The Jewish Bible has all of the same books that we have in our Old Testament. All of them. They're all there. But the last book in the Jewish Bible is Chronicles. Why is it Chronicles? It's Chronicles because Chronicles is a book that talks about returning to Jerusalem and rebuilding the temple. And that theme is important for the Jewish people. So if you take out our Bible, a Christian Bible, and you look in the Old Testament, Chronicles is not the last book in the Old Testament. What was the last book in the Old Testament? Not Jack. Or Mark. What's the last book in the Old Testament? Test time. You've got Bibles. It's Malachi. Why is it Malachi? It's Malachi because Malachi talks about Elijah coming and announcing the Messianic days. And right after Malachi, we as Christians go straight to the New Testament with the announcing of the birth of the Messiah. It's important for our tradition, for that book to be placed where it is. Even the order of the books that we use is midrash. It helps us interpret our story. And our story for today, the one that I read earlier, the one on your GPS, it has some really huge holes in it. And Rabbi Sandy Sasso has recalled a time in her life, in her ministry, when a young student came to her at Temple and asked her, "Who is Noah's wife?" And like Bill and Ted, even though she was a rabbi, she had no answer. She didn't know. So she went looking. She went digging down into those ancient Jewish texts, the oral Torah. Some of you may have heard of it as the Talmud, the book that holds ancient teachings and wisdom from those ancient rabbis in Judaism, and she found a couple of important things. Ancient rabbis noted this about Noah's wife. Noah's wife was named Naamah because her deeds were pleasing. Because Naamah is part of the word, the Hebrew word that means pleasing. And then she found a footnote that described Noah's wife by calling her Imzerah, which means mother of seed. And from those two pieces of wisdom from the oral tradition, those two pieces of wisdom that came in between the writing, the rabbi began to ask questions. If Noah's wife's deeds were pleasing, what could those deeds have been? They weren't the deeds of her husband. He was righteous. We hear that in the text. But she must have had her own deeds that pleased God as well. She was on her own merit. What could they have been? And if she was called mother of seed, what might she have done? And from those questions, she filled in the blanks with a midrash about Naamah, mother of seed. And the midrash goes like this. While Noah was asked by God to go out and gather up the animals 2 by 2 and bring them into the ark, Naamah's work, her task, was to go out and gather all the seeds so that she could replant the earth after the ark settled on dry land, so that she could fill the earth once more with vegetation. In the written story, Noah is the main character, it's clear. But his wife, Naamah, is an unwritten about partner in his work. And to get a glimpse of her character, we have to read in between the lines. And we can see that Naamah was a mother. She has 3 sons. We can see that she probably helped build the ship along with Noah, because no one could build a ship like that on their own. And we know that they were a religious, a righteous family, so she must have been a woman of God, a zookeeper. Because if you are locked in an ark with all of those animals, no matter who you are, you're a zookeeper. So she must have been a zookeeper and a farmer. Because wouldn't the earth have needed replanting after the flood had wiped out all living things? After all, wouldn't she and her family, wouldn't all of those animals have needed food to keep them living after they were released from the ark? What would have happened to all of them? What would they have done to survive if she had not done this pleasing act of gathering faithfully and replanting? When you dig down deeper and you think about it more and you let those questions just kind of float with you, this story, the story of God destroying and then creating again, starting over. This story of God undoing creation and redoing creation. These people that were chosen, Noah and Naamah, they become the new Adam and Eve. Have you ever thought about it that way? They are the people who are left. They become the mother and father of all future generations. What Adam and Eve destroyed in eating that apple or whatever fruit it actually was is given a second chance to be redeemed in these 2 people, Noah and his wife, Naamah. Adam is given an opportunity to name all of the animals that God creates in the first his creation story. But Noah is called upon to preserve those animals so that they might repopulate the earth. It is a reversal. And Naaman is given the opportunity to replant and restore the garden. The garden that Adam and Eve were banished from because of their sin. Her deeds, they must have been pleasing to God. Because God makes a promise after they emerge from the ark. It's the last words in our reading this morning. The promise of God, as long as the earth endures seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. That sounds to me like a promise to a gardener if ever there was one. Who is Noah's wife? Who is she? When you go to lunch today and you give thanks to God for all of the goodness, for the meal that you are about to eat, perhaps today you might also remember Naaman. And you might offer her just a little bit of thanks for the goodness that comes from her pleasing deeds. And while you're at it, you just might continue to ask some questions about our ancient text, this book that we call holy. Because what you find there, what you find on the written page, and what you find in between those lines, what you find is that the book, the Bible, it is filled with stories of what happens when ordinary people listen to and faithfully respond to our extraordinary God. So may we do the same. And may our deeds, even now, even today, be pleasing to our extraordinary God. Amen.